1998. I'll never forget it. It was the year Squaresoft released a truly cinematic and story-focused RPG with a light layer of survival horror in its tone, atmosphere, and gameplay. This almost impossible mix of genres and gameplay styles might spell disaster for any other game company, but the madmen and women at Squaresoft at the time managed to pull this wonderful combination off effortlessly, resulting in Parasite Eve. Following NYPD officer Aya Brea on her quest to take down Mitochondria Eve, a biologically enhanced superhuman hell-bent on destroying all of New York City and controlling the mitochondria that lies within everyone. Parasite Eve is a perfectly paced 8 to 10 hour game featuring one of the most addictive real-time ATB combat systems, coupled with a very rewarding gun and player customization system that offers a ton of replayability. The story was well told and featured a plethora of unique characters that never overstay their welcome. All of this paired with a hauntingly stylish soundtrack composed by the legend Yoko Shimomura sets the stage for Aya and Eve's epic rivalry and creates the thickest, dark New York City atmosphere I've ever experienced in a video game. An unforgettable experience that I'd consider a perfect game. Parasite Eve 2 released only a year later and is an exceptional survival horror game with a sprinkling of RPG elements for good measure. Featuring a deep elemental power system along with polished gunplay and a light character leveling system, Parasite Eve 2 stands on its own as a very fun game. With that said, PE2 is a sequel that left me a little disappointed. While I really enjoyed Aya's progression in becoming a more confident character, the game's overall weird story did absolutely nothing for me. It also didn't help that I found most of the supporting cast totally uninteresting, especially Aya's future love interest, the mysterious Kyle Madigan. Bundle all of that together with some very boring desert underground lab settings and some unimaginative level design and lots of backtracking, it's obvious to see that PE2 falls a little short compared to the first game's non-stop and well-paced story progression. Instead of building off what made the first game incredible, Square chose to emulate a lot of the basic gameplay tropes of Resident Evil, culminating in something good but a little out of the realm of what PE1 set up just a year prior. With its first two entries being inversions of each other in the gameplay department, the idea of a third Parasite Eve title would only come with the expectations of also being a departure of the previous two games. That, or you'd hope they'd just reboot the series and try to recapture what made the most popular game, Parasite Eve 1, successful. Story ideas for a third Parasite Eve had existed shortly after PE2's release, but never really went anywhere. Around the time of Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core's release is when Square Enix artist-director Tetsuya Nomura expressed interest in reviving the Parasite Eve series. Development started after Crisis Core's release, and with a team comprised of Square veterans like producer Yoshinori Kitase, scenario writer Motomu Toriyama, director Hajime Tabata, and previously mentioned Tetsuya Nomura. This game would aim for a multi-part Japanese mobile phone release. Yeah, flip phone games were still quite popular in Japan around this time. In 2008, development shifted to the PSP, wanting to take advantage of the increased hardware capabilities and larger audience of that system. The new focus was to create a unique third-person shooter with advanced military squad mechanics. I can only imagine this shift in genre was to capitalize on the, at the time, popularity of over-the-shoulder cover shooters. To achieve this new gameplay style, developer Hexadrive, a team made up of ex-Capcom staff, were brought on to work in cooperation with Square Enix, making the bulk of the gameplay. The return of Aya Brea was tricky for the devs, wanting to take advantage of the real-life 10-year time gap between Parasite Eve 2 and this game. Oh my god, can you believe there hadn't been a Parasite Eve game in 10 years before this one came out? Aya's characterization would go through many interesting changes. With the concept of reintroducing a character that's been gone for 10 years in her own universe and ours, the idea of amnesia, losing one's memories, and self-rediscovery would play a big part in Aya's story this time around. Great. Something the devs, more specifically Tetsuya Nomura, wanted to take advantage of was making this title a realistic and mature video game with adult themes. So emphasizing Aya's sexuality during gameplay, character design, and cutscene presentation was a goal the team wanted to achieve. We'll go into if they accomplished this goal a little later. Fast forward to 2010, I remember the day vividly. That year at Gamescom, a trailer for this mysterious third Parasite Eve game was finally revealed. The Third Birthday. This trailer was admittedly a mixed bag for me. I can't say I was too excited about its third-person shooter gameplay, but I remember being hyped about the idea of one of my favorite characters, Aya Brea, returning to New York City to battle a new mutation focused on destroying the city. Everything presented with the story and premise of the game all seemed unique and mysterious. I had extremely high hopes that Square Enix was about to blow my mind with a more faithful return to the Parasite Eve series. Now, if you remember in my PE2 video, I didn't actually play that game at release. Instead, when it and Parasite Eve 1 were re-released on PSN in 2011 was when I was finally able to check it out. So I made sure to catch up for this Third Birthday game. I even bought my very first PSP just for this game. Guys, the hype for this title was through the roof. After multiple trailers released, I got to see more of what the game was, and I would get even more excited. This outfit design for Aya also really grew on me. I actually kind of fell in love with it. After finishing my first playthrough, however, well, I'm sure you know what I'm gonna say next if you already know this game's reputation. I wasn't very happy with the Third Birthday. Almost every aspect of this game disappointed me in a way I wasn't expecting. From the basic bitch gameplay to the over-the-top insane story and characterization of Aya Brea. Guys, from here on, the kid gloves are off. I am going to give you my honest thoughts of this incredibly upsetting video game. Buckle up, guys, because things are about to get heated. The Third Birthday begins with the destruction of New York City. In this really cool opening cutscene, we get to see a new alien mutation emerging from the depths of the city, ripping apart different areas of New York. We get to see Liberty Island in shambles once again. Can you imagine living in NYC in the Parasite Eve universe and working on Liberty Island? Like, why does this place keep getting destroyed like this? It's a pretty intense and really well-animated intro. The very remixed PE1 music accompanied here builds some great tension, then releases into a beautiful piano arrangement. By the way, the music in this game was partially composed by Yoko Shimomura. The scene really evokes the mid to late game events of Parasite Eve, and creates a pretty cool end-of-the-world atmosphere. Too bad that tension is quickly diffused by some of the worst writing I've ever heard.
I just got word from the Seismic Institute. They've confirmed this is not an earthquake of any sort. Roger that. From here on out, we'll refer to it as the Babel.
Dude, that's not how real humans speak. After this happens, we're introduced to our main cast of characters. And oh look, there's Aya. Oh, okay. Thinking about it now, the first thing Aya says to us as a character, being a fearful moan, sets the stage immediately for what's to come. So our characters are part of the CTI, the Counter-Twisted Investigation. This room our cast inhabit for most of the game is the Overdive room, featuring a machine of the same name. This Overdive device has the ability of sending someone's consciousness back to the past. While in this past, the Overdive user has the ability to possess any humans who happen to be around. The CTI are using this experimental technology to effectively time travel and change the current twisted apocalypse happening just outside. By the way, this alien mutation taking over NYC is called the Twisted. Only one person is compatible with this Overdive tech, and that's our very own Aya Brea. How convenient. Like I mentioned before, this game is an amnesia tale, and after an incident occurred at her wedding to Kyle Madigan, the mysterious investigator that helped Aya along on her journey through PE2, Kyle and Aya's younger adopted sister, a clone of Aya named Eve Brea, have gone missing. You follow what I'm saying so far? Okay, good. So I won't beat around the bush with this video. I don't like this game's story at all, and I'll be talking all about why that is a little bit later. For now, I really want to cover the wildly different gameplay of the Third Birthday. We'll talk about this amazing narrative later. So something I hear a lot when discussing this title with other people is the popular mindset of, well, if you don't like the game's story, at least the gameplay is good. And I don't really agree with that, and let's talk about why. The Third Birthday is a linear, level-based third-person shooter with extremely light RPG elements. You control Aya with traditional over-the-shoulder control. Alongside firing a plethora of guns, Aya can also dodge in any direction, even while moving. Since this is a PSP game, the camera locks behind Aya while moving. Optional camera control does exist on the D-pad, but I rarely found any purpose in moving the camera for myself. While aiming and firing your gun, a hard lock-on is used to center your focus. Some weapons like the sniper rifle, grenade launcher, and a few special one-off guns use manual aim, and this is where the game sort of becomes like a worse version of RE4. By the way, you're going to be seeing a lot of RE4 DNA in this game. For real, there are so many times where, while I was on the move, hitting the aim button would send the camera straight up, throwing my aim to the ceiling. I'd have to come to a full stop before pressing the aim button for successful manual aim. With this one problem aside, I can confidently say that the overall control feel is fine. The camera stays behind Aya and tracks well through combat encounters. I recently played the game on a PS TV, which is a device that allows you to play most downloadable PSN titles on a TV with a controller, so I was basically playing this game as a somewhat console game. One of the key gameplay elements found in Third Birthday is the Overdive Mechanic. Like I said at the start, one of this game's dev goals was to create a unique military squad-based shooter. While diving into the past and taking on the countless twisted battles, Aya is able to overdive into each soldier on the battlefield. You're effectively body snatching as you play. Each soldier has their own weapon that you can use once you have them in possession. If your current soldier's HP is dropping a little too low, just dive into the next guy. Even while dying, you can dive into another soldier before Aya kicks the bucket. It's an interesting little mechanic for this type of game. Another neat little thing you can do in battle is when locking onto an enemy with your squad nearby, the ability Crossfire becomes available. Crossfire allows more than one soldier to take aim and open fire on whichever enemy you've got in your crosshairs. Once your linkage meter is full, is when you can execute a successful crossfire. I'm sorry, I know linkage is a real word, but it just sounds like some sort of bodily malfunction. The problems with crossfire and body snatching soldiers as a whole is that you can't give these guys direct orders. If they're not in your control, they act on their own, which by the way means one of three things. They'll either stand still doing absolutely nothing, fire their guns blindly at random targets, or attempt the lowest effort dodges you've ever seen in a game. Enemies hit really hard, so if you're trying to set up some sort of crossfire pincer attack with soldiers on all sides, there's a high chance that whatever enemy you're trying to focus on will just outright kill a teammate in one shot, decreasing the damage effectiveness of your crossfire. I should mention that if all soldiers die, including the one you're currently inhabiting, that's game over. So to have some pretty sloppy soldier AI like I just described isn't very good or fair from a basic gameplay perspective. This unfairness extends into other areas of the game, like in some of the boss fights. It sucks, but I guess it's kind of expected for a smaller budget game like this on the PSP. Before moving on, I should also say that some of the deeper elements of Crossfire never really come up in the moment-to-moment gameplay. So things like setting up an all-sides attack on an enemy isn't something you'll be doing all that much. I found myself needing to do this kind of thing more in the end game when battling stronger enemies. Overdiving into soldiers is interesting, but not anything life-changing. So speaking of the moment-to-moment battle, Aya has access to a lot of different weapons. You start the game with a weak infinite ammo pistol and a basic assault rifle. As you play through the game, you'll be unlocking other weapon types like shotguns, grenade launchers, and sniper rifles. Your basic attack through the game is shooting things. There are unfortunately no melee options like in the first two games. Rest in peace, club build, I will miss you. There's a lot of variety to the weapon types. You're not just getting one shotgun or pistol, you'll be unlocking multiples of every weapon type. Each gun has its own customization parts that drastically change its stats. Every single gun has 3 to 5 optional parts that you can buy with the right amount of money. Scoring kills obviously nets XP, and in turn levels up Aya, which I barely noticed a stat difference in, by the way. Your other attack type is the Overdive Kill, which is triggered when inflicting a certain amount of damage to an enemy. Hitting the triangle button at the right time sees Aya diving into a twisted, inflicting massive damage. Overdive Kill is essential when dealing with groups of enemies, with certain monsters in the early game being very spongy, and since your ammo is actually limited, using Overdive Kill can mean the difference between life and death in a lot of combat situations. Triggering Overdive Kill at the start can be a real drag since it's based on a particular stat that has to be upgraded through weapon customization. One thing I was in love with in Parasite Eve's 1 and 2 were the amount of Parasite abilities you could unlock through leveling up. They really added a lot to the gameplay variety and depth through both of those titles' basic gameplay loops. In PE1, Aya's Parasite energy manifested through very familiar white and green magic skills, much like the spells you'd find in a Final Fantasy game. At the start, Aya gets abilities like Poison, Multiple Cures, Haste, and in the endgame acquired the powerful damage-dealing skills like Liberate and Charge Shot. You really felt like you were getting super strong as you played, being able to deal with most threats without a problem. In PE2, Aya started with a list of damage-based elemental skills that you can freely level up and acquire at your own pace, having true customization over all of Aya's abilities. It felt a bit more paper and pencil than what you'd expect from a traditional JRPG. In retrospect, PE2's gameplay is quite impressive. So how does Third Birthday handle Parasite energy? Well, sadly, it doesn't. Well, it kinda does, but not in the way you'd expect. What we're left with is the Liberation ability. Liberation might sound like PE1's endgame super move, Liberate, you know, the one where Aya literally becomes a Pokemon and delivers a sick melee combo, slaughtering whoever it touches. It's a lot lamer in this game, though. Aya literally just pulls out a second pistol and has the ability to auto-dodge attacks once they hit her. Liberation doesn't last very long either, unfortunately. It'll be used mostly as a desperation move. You're on your last legs and you've got enemies all around. Pop this ability, take maybe 1 or 2 monsters down, create some breathing room. While I think Liberation is a fairly weak skill overall, it can be powered up and altered with something I think is actually kinda cool, and that's the Over Energy DNA customization system. So sometimes after getting a normal or Overdive kill, whatever vanquished creature will drop a special Over Energy chip. There are 24 different types of chips you can find. These chips can be plugged into one of Aya's DNA boards. From here you can gain some decent stat customization with chips that increase either damage output, defense, healing during an overdrive, or restocking your ammo during a successful crossfire. There are a few classic abilities that you can unlock, like Haste, which in this game is just bullet time, Impact Wave, which sees Aya launching a big AoE attack after diving into a soldier, and Inferno, which turns your Liberation into a self-destruct attack that kills everything around you. As cool as all of this sounds, of course there has to be some weird bullshit to diminish the potential of this feature. All of your over energy abilities are percentage based. You heard that right. So all of those stat boosting and super skills like Impact Wave are random chance depending on the individual chip's energy level. You have to increase the level of each ability on the board to make Aya actually use these skills consistently. Guys, this is so annoying. The most fun I had with this game was messing around with the DNA board and filling it out with all these cool skills, only to start a mission and be disappointed that Aya barely used any of them during said mission. Also, like, why does a powerful skill like Impact Wave have to be activated by diving into a soldier? Shouldn't it pop after diving into an enemy? That way, if you're surrounded, the Impact Wave hits the rest of the enemies? No, that's a good idea. We can't have any of that here. I rarely got this thing to work. Like, most of my uses happened when I would overdive to safety. The game choosing to give me this powerful skill with no enemies present. On my second and third playthroughs, these abilities did work better because I had leveled them up more. But why create a gameplay mechanic where you get all of these awesome magical skills that have the potential to create some stylish gameplay, but have almost all of them be random chance? It sucks. Why not just give the player a drop-down menu that pauses the game, where they can manually trigger these moves by expending a portion of their liberation meter? Seriously, that meter is only used for liberation. If you added this function to activate these literal parasite abilities, you'd be adding so much more depth to the basic gameplay loop. I just don't get why you'd lock these things behind a random chance like this. You basically have to replay the game over and over, unlocking the same energy chips just to upgrade and add something to your loadout that isn't just shooting a gun. It's a shame because the over energy feature has its own depth. Like, you can mix energy abilities together and make brand new ones, sometimes even creating a rare skill like Haste or Odds Up, which makes enemies drop higher quality energy chips. I'm not kidding when I say this little mini-game that had almost a zero actual payoff was the most fun I had in this game. I loved seeing new skills synthesized when combining older abilities. It felt like I was doing a little science experiment outside the main missions. I just wish I could reliably use this stuff in battle. That drop-down menu idea would make this game feel more like Parasite Eve. I will give this game a little bit of credit and tell you that pre-raise, the resurrection ability, worked pretty well across all of my playthroughs. But yeah, activating your over energy should be an on-the-fly in-game menu, not random chance. Random chance is stupid. So that's all of what makes up Aya and our basic basic combat gameplay. It's time to talk about the Twisted, our common enemy type. Well, there isn't much to talk about really. Like every other video game in existence, this title's monsters basically level up with you as you progress. Weaker enemies like the Slacker and Flying Wad help you master the game's dodging and get a grip over the basics of triggering an overdrive kill and crossfire. The Wad enemy in particular is spongy and powerful with its projectile attacks and quick movement. Later in the game, the Snatcher and Rover enemies create some interesting gameplay situations by either incapacitating or straight up one-shotting one of your soldiers. These guys force you to think quickly while staying on the move. I actually like these guys because they shake up the monotony of the game's cover shooting, forcing you to book it or risk losing your whole squad. This was also where constantly overdiving and moving your men around felt kind of cool, but also really shitty. I mentioned earlier that the soldier AI is pretty bad, and yeah, that badness can sometimes kick in with soldiers standing totally still, begging to be snatched up by one of these creatures. Thankfully, when facing the Snatchers, you can free any captive squad mates, so it's not totally terrible. It just feels like a chore sometimes, having to manually move each guy around so they don't get unfairly killed before your eyes. It's like babysitting. And babysitting is so much fun, right guys? Boss fights are something I wasn't really happy with at all. There are 7 in total, and the majority of them require you to wait around for them to get ready to fight. There are a solid 3 bosses that have invincibility states where you have to do something very specific for them to actually take any damage. Now, I'm not saying this is generally a bad thing in video games, because plenty of games that I like do this. It's just that in this game, things are very obtuse. Like this one balloon monster is literally invincible until you defeat a certain amount of her weird wind tornadoes. How this makes the boss vulnerable, I couldn't tell ya. Oh my god, the Queen boss fight is so frustrating. We gotta talk about this. So this boss sees Aya floating in a nightmare void, surrounded by debris, humans that she can overdive into, and smack right in the middle of all of this is a giant, stupid-looking monster. When the creature hits the bottom of the void, game over. Since you're floating and falling, you can't move Aya around. To navigate the battlefield, you have to dive into the unconscious people littered around the environment, which isn't the bad part. When you first play this game, your weapons are extremely weak. This boss has a ton of HP and 2 weak points. Since you need something like a sniper rifle to manually aim at one of the weak points, your lock-on aiming won't be doing much for you here. To remedy this, there are also some floating vehicles like cars, trucks, and train cars, I kid you not, that you can blow up to damage the boss, opening it up for a powerful overdive kill. All of this sounds easy enough until the boss launches a one-hit kill attack, forcing you to move away from your current position, resulting in you losing track of whatever explosive you needed to shoot, aka the definition of frustration. Playing through this boss again, I think I had at least 4 retries, and every time it felt unfair. Like it was something that I wasn't capable of doing anything about. If your sniper shots are good enough and you get good explosive spawns, you'll make it through comfortably. But on the first go, if you don't know any of this stuff, it's like the worst thing ever. Aside from maybe 2 of the bosses, overall these guys just aren't fun to fight against. I feel like you'll be struggling more than you'll be clearly understanding what to do from the onset. It's super unfortunate, especially when compared to Parasite Eve 1 and 2, where those games had totally epic boss fights almost every time. I think one boss in the Third Birthday got me hyped, and mostly because it was a throwback to PE1. I'll talk about it later because it relates to the story. The visual design of the enemies is kinda bad as well. I mean, I'll give them credit. This is a series about fighting some of the most disgusting creatures ever seen in a game, but the monsters in Third Birthday just aren't as memorable. They're just twisted looking. The name perfectly suits the design, I guess. The level design in this game is perfect for what it's trying to do. That being a squad-based cover shooter. How you feel about the genre might color your opinion about the game's level design though. Most battle arenas are flat plains with brightly colored objects to hide behind. Most of the mid to late game areas are just this. The opening level is the best designed mission because it perfectly uses all of the game's mechanics and design in a well-paced way. You're mostly running and gunning, which is a lot more fun than being forced to hide behind cover or risk getting one-shotted by some psycho monster. The game is at its best when you're running around and dodging all over the place. But sometimes that style of play doesn't feel as balanced as just hiding behind cover, because like I said, all the enemies hit really hard. There are a few levels that don't see you running around and shooting on foot. There's a tank mission, which I thought played fairly well, and a helicopter set piece, which I felt went on for too long. I feel like most of the levels overstay their welcome. There are so many points in the mid-game levels that feel like natural endpoints, but then it just keeps going. I know the game was built as a handheld title to be played in short bursts when you're on the train going to your dead-end job, but you can really feel the repetitiveness when you sit down and play it as a console game in your home. With that being said, I'm going to tell you guys about something that didn't bore me to tears with this game, and that's the side objectives in the club mission. In the first level, Aya has to explore Club Sacrifice, a cute homage to the concert scene in PE1. In this twisted nightclub, there are civilians trapped in certain rooms. You can rescue these people by diving into them and running them back to the club's safe room. I thought this was so cool, and I remember back when I played the game for the first time, I wanted more of this type of stuff as I progressed. Some of the lost people are out of reach in different rooms. You have to find them by looking around in Overdive mode. It's a really fun way of using this unique mechanic, but it isn't really used for much outside of this one optional scenario. It was definitely a bright spot for me and made me wish that we got more unique overdive situations throughout all of the game, but unfortunately, we don't. Overall, Third Birthday's gameplay works for what it is, but honestly doesn't do much for me. The repetitive core gameplay of lock on, shoot thing, overdive kill, manually aim, slowly shoot thing, overdive kill, starts off fine enough, but gets old really quick. A lot of interesting concepts like overdrive and the over-energy system don't really pay off in the most meaningful ways either. And yes, all of this is in a PSP game, a really polished PSP game at that. But let me ask you this. What Parasite Eve fans wanted this? It's strange, like we wait 10 full years for a third game in the series, and it's this. A game with barely any variety to its basic gameplay, complicated character customization, boring level design, and bosses that frustrate more than they innovate. It's all super disappointing and really basic in my eyes. Like, even the unlockables are weaker here than they were in a game like Parasite Eve 2. Remember the gunblade? Yeah, it's kind of a dumb idea for a game that's supposed to be based in reality, but using that thing was not only fun, but turned the game into a shooter hack and slash. In Third Birthday, no matter what you're doing, you're shooting. Lame. Immobile tank level? Scripted on-rails chopper mission? That's your gameplay variety? I'd rather do that insane PE2 picture puzzle again.
Welcome to the stream.
For me, all of the weak gameplay stuff would be forgivable if the story wasn't as bad as it is. So yeah, let's dive deep into that shit show. Ugh, where do I start? Well, for one, the story is totally incomprehensible. The highest possible time travel concepts are brought up and poorly explained. The game just expects you to understand what these people are talking about, expositing some of the worst and wordy dialogue I've ever heard in a game. So many specific in-universe phrases are thrown at you, and the game expects you to catch up with what all of it means in the optional library of files you can read. Well, I read all of it, and guess what? It barely made any sense to me. Most of the game is Aya taking on CTI missions and taking down key twisted monsters who were responsible for catastrophic events in the past. You do all of this until basically everyone except your totally not evil boss dies at the CTI building. As you play these missions, everyone talks about overdiving, going to the past and correcting those mistakes for a better future, as if we already know who and what this stuff is. The writing, like you've seen,
Here on out, we refer to it as the Babel.
is pretty bad. And the characterizations are just terrible, especially for the returning PE characters. Speaking of that in particular, let's talk about Aya Brea. So this is by far the most controversial thing in this game. Compared to the first two titles, this version of Aya is totally different. From consistently whining like a child to suggestive moans being her basic form of communication.
The boss is gone.
I came to tell you something about your dream.
It's clear to see that this version of our favorite Mist agent is a lot weaker in every facet of her being. At first, I thought she'd be a little weak and scared at the start of the game due to her amnesia and forgetting a lot of her combat training. But as the game progresses, Aya barely makes any character development until the last few minutes of the story, which, oh my god, we'll get there when we get there. She just comes off as very pathetic in this game's narrative. It's genuinely frustrating to see when you have the context of Aya's past adventures. Like, even when Aya wasn't used to fighting monsters in PE1, her natural instinct was to just jump into battle and try her best to protect those around her. Her actions in this game feel like she's being forced into everything she's doing, and it feels really bad, like uncomfortably bad. A lot of that has to do with our supporting cast, which we will get into in a minute. But yeah, her agency from PE 1 and 2 is nowhere to be found, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Something that also gets brought up a lot when talking about this Aya is how her clothes rip off during gameplay. It's a little gross, especially since only her outfit is visually taking damage and not her skin. Like, she's not even bleeding after getting skewered by some nightmare monster. The stage 2 battle damage goes a little too far in my opinion, barely leaving anything to the imagination. I think the first level of battle damage is fine, but it just feels like this feature doesn't need to be in this game at all. It feels like an actual RPG mechanic, but armor defense is such a small thing in this game since you take so much damage from every enemy attack anyway. It feels like this feature had a very specific purpose being implemented, and I'm sure you understand what I'm getting at here. Nomura was horny. It's interesting because in my research, Nomura really wanted to emphasize the sexiness in this game, and another word that kept coming up in said research was realism. Making a game about a woman who's fighting monsters and being scared and wimpy is fine. It's just a little weird when in the gameplay her clothes are getting ripped off in a sexual way, but you're also kicking the asses of every monster in front of you with little to no problem. Sure, Aya is sexually moaning while performing an overdive kill most of the game, but she's still wrecking every creature in her path. It's so tonally inconsistent and comes off as just wanting to see skimpy Aya running around with her knockers out, killing monsters. Which, yeah, there's nothing wrong with wanting to see that, but when you tout your game as being realistic and mature, and then turn around and make something totally immature, well, it just comes off as lazy, inconsistent theming. In other words, it's really stupid. Like, we just talked about Bayonetta on this channel, and that's a game where its main character is a pure sex symbol, but also like the most confident character ever made. Bayonetta has consistency with her actions and sexuality. Everything makes sense as you're playing and watching the cutscenes. Aya is supposed to be terrified in the cutscenes, but then in the gameplay, depending on your situation, you're almost effortlessly mowing down your enemies. There's zero consistency to any of this. Something else that adds to the inconsistency is our supporting cast. Each and every one of these guys sucks. One thing that really pisses me off, and this goes back to Aya not having much agency in the story, is that these guys constantly talk down to her. It comes off as so condescending.
Look out!
A frontal attack is just going to get you killed.
Aya, aim for the front legs to stop its movement. Damn. I want it done.
Everything has a weakness. Find it.
Aya, you have to find and attack its weak spot.
Everything has a weakness. Find it.
Aya, you have to find and attack its weak spot. Okay, you're in control of Gabby. Aim the sniper rifle by using the scope. That's good. Now, get the enemy in the middle of the scope and shoot. Good job, Aya.
Motherfucker, Aya is bulkier than you. Stop talking to her like she's a baby. She can kick your scrawny ass any day of the week. I love when this guy Blank talks about how you don't want to know what'll happen if this particular monster gets a hold of you, Aya. Like you'd even know, you punk ass bitch. Aya's actually on the battlefield as you speak. This has happened to her already. This guy, Cray, he has an emotional subplot, but not once does the game ever communicate who this man is to Aya before he dies. Is he a friend of hers? A past lover? Oh, he taught her how to shoot. Cool, who cares? Also, him allowing Aya to use certain skills or weapons in battle is so insulting. When he dies, you get this huge emotional ending monologue for him, and I'm just sitting there baffled like, wait, who are you again? Why should I care? It's ridiculous. Kyle Madigan from PE2 is in this game, and he's so weird. So Kyle and Aya got married before Aya lost her memory. Kyle goes missing, but Aya starts having these ghostly visions of him as you progress. It comes off super weird because Aya doesn't remember this man, but he's talking to her like lovers do, so it's super creepy.
The truth will only hurt you.
Stay back!
I know you, Aya. I know all about you. Your hair. Your back. And your lips too.
Kyle. Ew, stop. It's so bizarre and cringeworthy. I never liked Kyle's characterization in PE2, so knowing that Aya married this guy and is getting talked at like this makes me legit uncomfortable. It kinda comes off like the people making this game didn't realize how creepy this is. Like, guys, read the room. By far the worst of our supporting cast is Dr. Maeda. So in the first Parasite Eve, at the end of the second chapter, this mysterious Japanese scientist enters the story to help Aya and her friends track down Eve. Maeda was a pivotal player in the first game. He was a cute and shy nerd that probably had a crush on Aya, but it never once got weird. It was actually quite cute because he'd give Aya good luck charms throughout the game. I think that's so cool. Like, this man of science believes in this cultural keepsake, and he wants Aya to take it with her so it can watch over her while she's in battle. Yeah, it's super cute. In the third birthday, Dr. Maeda returns, and...
We can definitely get Eve back. Nubile body with your DNA. Fascinating. I never tire of seeing your exquisite overdive technique. Listen to me, Aya. You're here. You're real. If you're hurt, it's okay to cry. I mean it. Letting your emotions out will help heal your wounds. I know it will. How sweet your tears must taste.
What? So Square Enix thought the best way to bring back this super smart and charming scientist was to make him a total creepazoid. What were they thinking? Every time you talk to this guy, he says or does something that'll have you wondering if you're playing a parody of a Parasite Eve game.
When did you come over from Japan?
The second I heard about the Twisted. I'm always prepared to travel at the drop of a hat. You never know when research is going to call. Or maybe I sensed it. My princess was in distress.
Bro, chill the fuck out. I just asked you about our mission. This Maeda is the type of guy you don't want to fall asleep around at a party or take drinks from. Complete character assassination. It's kind of weird too, because in the first game, a lot of people speculate that Maeda was based on the original author for the Parasite Eve novel, Hideaki Sena. I kinda hope that isn't true if this is the character's legacy. If it is, then that definitely says something about how Square feels about him. Can I say that I totally hate hearing the PE1 track, A Piece of Remain, in Maeda's hideout? It was a song that played in the first game whenever Aya's partner Daniel interacted with his son. The track is there to get emotional moments across to the player. In this game, it's tied to a perverted creep. And it sucks because this remix by Yoko Shimomura is fantastic. All of the music is fantastic. It all just doesn't fit with the dissonant vibes the story and characters constantly give off. It's all wasted on this train wreck of a game. I don't get why all of the returning characters had to get this very shitty treatment. Like, Square, do you hate Parasite Eve? Because that's what it feels like. All of the new characters are so much more confident and normal than the older ones, and that sucks because I couldn't identify with any of them, because they all annoyed me and none of them are fleshed out. So what we're left with is a disrespected returning cast, and a crew of new guys made completely out of cardboard. It's such a shame. God, look at Aya running along with these soldiers, panting and moaning as she goes. She does not belong here. I just can't stand how Square took one of their coolest female characters and just destroyed her like this, breaking her down to this obedient bitch baby. A total fantasy of what a woman should be in the eyes of a condescending male writer. By the way, don't misunderstand what I'm getting at. I'm not at all saying you can't make a game about a disempowered woman. One of my all-time favorite games is Haunting Ground, a game about a weak, defenseless girl who's being chased around by freaks who she can't fight back against. The reason why Haunting Ground's characterization for its lead, Fiona, works and Third Birthday's characterization of Aya doesn't is because Haunting Ground's main character is established as a weak and scared person. Fiona isn't a fighter, so it makes sense she'd react the way she does in the situation she's in. Aya Brea is a pre-established, strong and confident woman, so to all of a sudden switch her to this freaked out wimpy chick who's crying and moaning at everything breaks that pre-established character. It goes against everything that was set up in the previous games. Gone are the days of cool, collected Aya struggling with her mitochondria powers and inner demons of becoming becoming like her worst enemy, Eve. Aya in the first game was a three-dimensional character with hopes and fears, one of those fears being that she would accidentally hurt her friends on their suicide mission. When pushed to her limits, she takes everything into her own hands and defeats Eve all by herself in a desperate attempt to save NYC. In Parasite Eve 2, Aya, having conquered the mitochondria threat, sees her on this basic investigation that turns into something much greater. The events that play out turn Aya's life upside down, discovering a 3-year-old clone of herself named Eve. Aya's motherly instinct kicks in as she does whatever it takes to escape her new nightmare while protecting this poor experimented-on kid. It's a beautiful contrast between the first 2 games, Aya battling a world-ending threat named Eve, then protecting a new life, a new Eve. In a failing world overrun by monsters, this woman finds a way to find a new start with Eve and Kyle at the end of the day. There isn't much room for a continuation after PE2's story. It feels like an insult even trying to tell another story for this character who seemingly got her proper closure, let alone it being this gross and disrespectful. I seriously don't get the decision to strip all of that character building away to reduce her down to this utter weakling. Okay guys, it's time to talk about the twist. In the final chapters of this game, Aya, having left the CTI after the deaths of her team members, finds herself at the heart of the twisted threat, the Babel. Battling through this organic nightmare tower, Aya is intercepted by an almost unkillable monster called the Reaper. Guys, this is the one part of the story for 1 second I felt something that wasn't indifference or depression. Do you guys remember the ending of Parasite Eve 1? No. Not the final epic boss or the haunting visual of the opera house scene. I'm talking about the final run from the ultimate being. So the Reaper battle takes that terrifying song from the end of Parasite Eve 1 and makes it an absolute club banger. No joke, this song is awesome. I was so hyped hearing this song and was immediately taken out of that hype when I realized I had to kill this boss with a manual aim weapon. After defeating this monster, we discover Aya's totally not evil CTI boss, Mr. Hyde Boar, in the heart of the Babel. This guy spouts a lengthy villain monologue, spilling the beans on his plan and revealing that he too can also overdive. Ooh. Hyde tells Aya that all of the bosses she's been fighting throughout this game have been human shapeshifters called High Ones. Great name. Aya gets a flashback of herself shooting her adopted sister Eve at her wedding before passing out. Dragging himself and Aya into the past, we fight this guy in the ice skating rink of Rockefeller Center. Before the fight begins, all of our friends show up as lifeless bodies that float around the environment. It's super weird. By the way, I think the people making this game really like RE4. I mean, just look at this guy. Village Chief, anyone? After diving into all of these people you never cared about once, Mr. Hyde gears up for one final attack, but with Aya having unlimited liberation, we kick his ass no problem. This results in Hyde bringing Aya back to where everything started, that fateful day, Aya's wedding. So for no explainable reason, I'm not kidding about this, Aya's wedding is crashed by a very violent SWAT team that guns down everyone except for Eve. With her last breath of life, Aya skillfully takes down every single soldier without hesitation. Hyde approaches Eve and things start to get legit creepy.
I'm Eve?
Yes, you are Eve, Brea. Time 0 is when you dove into Aya's body, and that is when your memory was taken from you.
Aya was lying on the ground. I wanted to save her.
That's the very moment when the Overdive was born, when both of your souls collided. In return, Aya Brea's soul, it was destroyed. I have come here to graciously offer myself to the Mother. You will then be born again, and your descendants will be advanced life forms with the ability to ultimately end the war against the Twisted. I'm not going to let you go. If you don't like it, you can just become part of me. Let's dream together. The same dream.
Leave her alone, will you?
Aya!
What? Aya's soul should be gone.
Well, it's already been destroyed. Sweet dreams.
So at the moment of Aya's death, Eve's Overdive powers awoken and she dived into Aya's body. The entire game, we haven't actually been playing as Aya Brea. We've been playing as Eve. Before the real Aya finally passes away, Eve must pull the trigger on her older sister in order to inhabit her body and correct the timeline. A lonely weapon crosshair hovers over Aya as the game waits for us to pull the trigger. I genuinely hate this, like a lot. So the original Aya Brea that we all know and love comes back in the last 5 minutes of this game to be badass and die, accomplishing basically nothing and forever being wiped out of the Parasite Eve timeline. Like for real, her soul is wiped from existence and body currently inhabited by Eve. Why? What's so insulting about this is that Aya comes off really cool in this scene, but dies for seemingly no reason. That SWAT team legit has no explanation. They just show up and kill everyone. I've talked to a lot of people over the years who use this scene as an excuse to say the game is actually good. Everything's fine, guys. Square wasn't shitting on Aya the whole game. It was just an innocent bait and switch. Sorry, but I'm not putting up with any of that brain-dead logic. Forcing me to play as some weak weirdo and then telling me that she's supposed to be one of my favorite characters just to spit in my face and tell me, psych, it wasn't her, and then kill the real Aya Brea, making me shoot her? Like, why do I have to shoot her? It's so insulting to the people who like this character. Having to pull the trigger on her not only is the biggest character assassination, but one hell of a slap in the face to the Parasite Eve fanbase. Something else I always hear is people saying Third Birthday is disconnected from the series, so it doesn't matter what happens in this game. And that isn't true because this game from day one was meant to be Parasite Eve 3. The first two titles are constantly referenced in this game, in the files, instruction manual, and you know, just the story. I mean, guys, this game is about Aya, Kyle, and Eve. It's 100% supposed to take place after PE2. It's not disconnected. This is how the trilogy actually ends. Honestly, it feels like those people are in denial when they say that kind of stuff. I've gotta say, guys, you know how sometimes people bring up misogyny in video games? Why isn't this game ever brought up? It feels the most gross, especially when you realize that all of that sexual moaning and clothes ripping was happening to an underage character. It's so messed up. Eve is literally forced into Aya's body and subjected to whatever the hell her mostly older male team want her to do. Like, what if you were one of the people that liked the fan service in this game? Oh, I guess you also like whatever the hell is going on now. If you're one of those people who does enjoy the sexuality on display, even after learning the truth, well, I'm not gonna stop you, but I'm sure someone else will.
I'm taking you in.
Between this game and Metroid Other M, it was like Nintendo and Square got together to come up with the best ideas to ruin two of the strongest female characters ever made. It's kinda shocking how many parallels the two games have as well. Both are about former badass babes forced to take orders from a mostly male team and cry over lame-ass characters to evoke emotions in the player. Sorry, but even back in 2010, gamers weren't having any of this bullshit. By the way, both games released in the same year. What a nightmare world it was back then. I hate this game. It's probably the only game I truly hate. If you want to keep saying the story's bad but the gameplay is good, well, you can keep living that lie. If a game's story is this insulting and gross to its source material, I'm sorry, but I'm not putting up with it just to experience some at best decent gameplay. If a game's framework is terrible and makes you feel uncomfortable, you don't have to play it. Guys, this channel is all about my favorite video games and their respective series. I knew I was gonna have to talk about Third Birthday at some point, so I decided to do it now to get it over with. Honestly, I haven't played it in years, and replaying it for this video was one of the most exhausting experiences I've had in a while. Parasite Eve is one of my favorites, and making this video kinda feels like I'm burying Aya and the series. As you probably already know, the Parasite Eve series went nowhere after this, effectively killing off the franchise. Guys, as a scared little kid growing up in New York, I found strength in characters like Jill Valentine, Claire Redfield, and especially Aya Brea. I've played Parasite Eve countless times over the years, and it's something that's helped me get through a lot of shit in my life. I would go into Manhattan with my friends to get away from everything, and physically being in the environments I would play through in PE1 was magical. I felt a genuine connection to that game and those awesome characters. Looking back on the Third Birthday, it really feels like Square didn't have a solid grasp of what they were doing. They just went with the lowest common denominator. Make it sexy, hopefully it'll sell, which it didn't, and then kill off the main character in the dumbest way possible. It's like Nomura just remembered the sexy ads he drew for the first two games and said, yeah, that's what Parasite Eve was all about. Look, if you like this game, fine. If it was your first Parasite Eve game and you love it because you have good memories with it, that's awesome. I'm happy for you. All I'm asking is that you please respect those of us who've been with this series since day one. And please respect me when I say, the Third Birthday killed Parasite Eve. And Aya Brea. Before I close out today's video, I just want to give a shout out to a bunch of people that helped make this video as good as it is. So first up is Drossart. Dross made a brand new 2020 Susie avatar for this video's thumbnail, and I absolutely love everything about it. It's good to have you back, Dross. Another one of my art friends, Liz Art, contributed this insane painting that you're seeing on screen right now. It is very dramatic and very emotional, but I felt it was appropriate for this video. In any event, thank you so much, Lisa. Two of my good friends who are also content creators here on YouTube and Twitch, Carcinogen SDA and Wolf DNC, helped out a lot in providing a ton of footage for Parasite Eve 2 for this video. I actually had the game fully recorded before I started working on this video, but my hard drive died with the footage on it. So I just want to say thank you so much to Wolf and Carcy, because you guys helped me so much with this video. Like, you guys have no idea. Also, huge shout out to Mono Memory, who made a few of the tracks that you heard in today's video. It's been a while since me and Mono collabed on a video together, and I'm really happy it was this one, because the tracks that he made for this piece are just so amazing. Please go check out Mono Memory. All of his music is banger. If you guys like this video, please consider subscribing and checking out my Patreon down below. Okay guys, I'm taking a vacation. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you all later.